All right, we are live, everyone. I'm joined today by based abolitionist Chad, Jeremy, and utilitarian soy cuck master, Humane Hancock. And we're going to be discussing whether welfarism, or Jeremy would like to specifically use the term, I think, neo-welfarism, should be welcome in the movement. Is it vegan? Should we be doing it to end the animal holocaust? Will it end the animal holocaust quicker? And by welfarism, well, let's first define what we mean by welfarism. Maybe after we introduce ourselves, actually. I shouldn't be rude. Jeremy, would you like to first just introduce yourself to my audience for anyone who's not aware of you?
Yes, for sure. So thank you, George, and thank you, Jack, for this debate. So my name is Jeremy Lopez. I am from Marseille. I am a vegan educator and author, and my work is mainly to create a vegan world.
Cool. And Jack, Humane Hancock, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to update on your wonderful introduction of me.
Mine was perfect. It doesn't need to be.
My name is Jack Hancock. I run a YouTube channel called Humane Hancock. And yeah, I got started in activism, I don't know, maybe like 9 or 10 years ago. Went down the vegan rabbit hole, was kind of very married to the vegan theory of change, spending my time trying to get as many people as possible to go vegan. Over time, I became less convinced, I suppose, of that theory of change. But I'm very much an abolitionist. I want to see the end of all violence to animals. Yeah, so my YouTube channel plus directing a feature film has been the main thing I've been doing. My dad is a slaughterhouse worker, and so I've recently finished producing this film about that, which will be coming out in a couple of months or so on YouTube. Oh yeah, and also on my channel, over time I became concerned with the suffering of wild animals as well, and I think that's a bit of a blind spot in the movement. So yeah, that's me. Hopefully that's a decent introduction.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you both. So let's define then for the audience what we mean by welfarism or neo-welfarism. I don't actually know if they're two separate things. Maybe Jeremy knows something about that. Yeah, Jeremy, because I think you mainly wanted to have this discussion. What is it that's meant by neo-welfarism, and is it different from welfarism?
Neo-welfarism is the idea that we can use welfarism to achieve the abolition of animals.
Okay.
So for everybody to be okay with the term, welfarism is the idea that the problem is not the fact to exploit animals, but the way we do it. So as long as we reduce the suffering of animals during their exploitation, this is okay for welfarism. And neo-welfarism is the idea that we can reduce the suffering of animals during their exploitation and think that this very idea of reducing suffering will somehow lead to abolishing the exploitation of animals.
I think that's a very, very important distinction to make, because I see the term welfarist hurled around the movement a lot at abolitionists who want the end of the animal holocaust, but just want obviously better conditions while we have it, or think that voting for if obviously we don't want the egg industry to exist, none of us do here, but someone might vote to give the chickens bigger cages or no cages or whatever it is, even though we want the whole thing ended. Now, Jeremy, I take it from your point of view, you are strongly against the idea of neo-welfarism. That means even though you obviously don't want animals to suffer, you would not vote for a policy that would decrease their suffering while they're in the on these farms and in these slaughterhouses. Could you explain why that is actually, and then I'll let kind of Jack just bounce off you with that.
So neo-welfarism is basically the worst enemy of a vegan world. It can be tempting to think that it's great to reduce animal suffering, I mean, we all see what happened to animals, and we are devastated by what we saw. We are shocked, and it's very logical to want this to end, right? And to want this to end as quick as possible, right? The problem is that if we believe that by changing the way we exploit animals, we will create a vegan world, we are seriously misleading. How can we abolish animal exploitation if we not destroy the root cause of animal exploitation? And what is the root cause of animal exploitation? I have a little piece of paper here. I don't know if you see it well.
Yep, we see that.
Yeah.
Can't see all the text on it, but
yeah, we can't see we can't see the small print, but we can see animal exploitation and we can see species.
Okay. So basically, we have a tree here, and we have the roots, and the roots, there is speciesism. And speciesism, what is speciesism? Basically, it's the discrimination, the moral discrimination toward animals that make us see animals as inferior. And from this inferiority, we have, we said to ourselves, we have the right to exploit animals, right? And from the roots, from this idea that we are superior to animals and we can exploit them, comes all the different parts of animal exploitation. I don't know if you see well, so there is zoo, there is leather, circus, meat, foie gras, horse riding, cheese, silk, milk, wool, vivisection, eggs, and everything that exists, right? So every time we focus on the different aspect of animal exploitation, we can cut a branch, of course, but it will always start to grow because the tree is not dead. So the only way to destroy all the form of exploitation is actually to destroy the root. That's why when we focus on one form of exploitation or one other, we are actually acting in the superficial side of the root cause, which is speciesism, which is the right to exploit. It's only when we help people to understand why it's wrong and why we should stop thinking that it's okay to use animals, because animals have a right to live like us. When we destroy that, people can become vegan, and that's the only way to create a vegan world, because it destroys the very root cause of animal exploitation.
Yeah, and just before I go into Jack, I just want to say for anyone watching, I'm not moderating this as a debate. I'm in this debate as such. This is all three of us, and we're going to try and bounce ideas off each other to see what's right and what's wrong. But Jack, I want to hear your response to Jeremy. What do you make of what he's saying there?
So, yeah, interesting. I guess there's like a lot of directions I can go in because a lot has been said there. Maybe before I get started, I'll just clarify a distinction that might be important in this discussion, and that's this distinction between like value differences compared to so a value difference could be if someone has a different end goal. Maybe one person wants to see the end of all violence on animals, and maybe the person doesn't. They just want improved conditions, compared to like empirical questions. So the idea that like I think you called it neo-welfarism, is like the biggest harm to like a vegan world. That's an empirical question that in theory we can like kind of gather evidence for and come to a decision. So I think it might be important just kind of keep track of whether we're discussing like a value thing or an empirical question throughout this conversation. So I'll just like pick up on something that Jeremy says that I think I disagree with, suggesting that the kind of only way, well, maybe I don't completely disagree with it. The kind of only way to get to animal liberation is to deal with this root problem of like speciesism in their attitudes. I actually think that attitude change can come after. So you had the kind of the branches, right? And you had things like if we deal with like food or fur or any of these things, it doesn't deal with the root cause, and then the problem continues. The branch grows back. I think that the part of the problem with like getting anti-speciesist values throughout society right now is that there's so much psychological baggage in people having a clear view on animal ethics, partly because of the behaviors they're participating in, because of the fact that they're literally eating animals. I think that you can make a case that the attitude change, dealing with the speciesism in attitudes becomes a hell of a lot easier once you were to say, hypothetically, get the society off meat through alternative proteins or something that became more economically viable and taste better or maybe healthier. So I actually think that specifically in relating to food, I think dealing with the branch of food is probably extremely important in getting like the anti-speciesist values out there.
Yeah, because Jeremy, I wanted to say just one thing on your opening kind of argument. Maybe there was too much baked in there of the assumption that the people that we don't already know that speciesism is the root cause of the suffering. So I think the case is here, we all do know that speciesism is the root cause of all this, and this is what's causing it. But maybe I didn't get a sense of why reducing animal suffering can't be compatible with anti-speciesism. Because why not do both? Why not be like, yeah, sure, I'll vote on the bigger cages and we'll vote to end this whole industry. Like, why don't those ideas complement each other? Why do they compete?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So this is a very great question because it's indeed very important to precise that. In fact, it's completely incompatible because veganism is basically the idea that we want animals to be free from exploitation. I think we all agree with that, right, Jack?
Well, I'm actually thinking I want to push back on a little bit of something here, which is going to sound weird. But I think that we shouldn't. So if the conversation is going towards like welfarism versus abolitionism, I think it's important not to conflate abolitionism with veganism. Veganism is one theory of change to try and liberate animals, but it's not the only one or necessarily the most effective one. Getting individuals to go vegan, there are organizations that have been extremely like abolitionists with a capital A, like Direct Action Everywhere, who have rejected like individual consumption habits as like a theory of change. So I would just like try and de-emphasize veganism in the conversation, because then I feel like we're going to get into other different waters where I'm going to be like, I'm not sure I kind of like that framing.
Well, in fact, the definition of veganism is not even a debate, because it has been defined by Leslie G. Cross.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the definition of veganism. What I'm saying is getting individuals to go vegan is one theory of change, but it's that's not abolitionism. You can be an abolitionist and pursue a different theory of change.
Okay, so this what's bring back to the question. So when we say to people that it's okay to reduce the suffering of animals during their exploitation, as a vegan educator, right? We are actually promoting animal exploitation. Think about that just 1 second, Jack and George. Would you think it will be okay to be a woman rights activist and to say, okay, women are sexually abused, they are raped in many countries very regularly. Let's talk to men and let's say to men, okay, take this drug, put it in the drink of women. Like that, when you will abuse the woman, at least the woman will have less suffering.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that obviously would be a terrible, terrible thing to lead with. Now, if we lived in a world where by default women were there was a rape industry of women, and we were abolitionists who wanted that to end, but there was a vote on should they receive the drug before it happens, what would be the problem with saying yes to that vote, so long as you're saying, by the way, the whole thing is awful and needs to end?
It's absolutely wrong, because the problem is not how much the victims suffer, is not how much women suffer, is the basic fact that women are used as a means to an end. This is basically the concept of justice. I know that we didn't agree, Jack, and we will talk about that later for sure, but the very concept of justice is to not use other people as means to an end. That means that if I exploit you, George, without suffering, if you are sleeping and I go into your room and I try to do things with your body, justice protects you from that. You cannot suffer, maybe, but justice protects you. Why slavery is wrong? You have made a great conference, a great talk, Jack. I have seen on your YouTube channel. You have made a great talk, and you start your talk with the idea of slavery. And I have loved how you start your talk, because you talk about this very interesting idea of Snail Grave, who was on a boat and who see this child, and he saved this child. And right after saving this child, he just sent him to slavery. And you talk about this blind spot that we have, because in the society at the time, we don't have the moral education to understand why it's wrong, right? And this is a blind spot that we have today. We as vegan, if we don't even see that we cannot we cannot be against an injustice while promoting it, we are just missing the point. Because, yeah, sure.
I just right. So the way I do pretty much all ethics is looking at things from the victim's point of view. So here would be my take if I was kidnapped by ISIS, right? And I want to hear actually what you two would do in this situation. So let's say I'm kidnapped by ISIS and I'm in that orange jumpsuit. I'm kneeling down on the camera. They're about to cut my throat. They said, we're going to decapitate George Martin in 2 days' time. It's going to happen. There's no way you're going to free him. We've got him in this, place somewhere where you can't find him. But do you want him put to sleep before we do the throat cutting? Now, I assume, Jack, you would say, yeah, for the love of God, just put him to sleep.
Well, not if it's you.
But Jeremy, what would you vote? And Jeremy, just to say my point of view, I would want you guys to say, yes, put George to sleep before the throat cutting. Obviously, save him if you can, military. But if it's not going to happen, for goodness sake, ISIS, put the bolt in George's head before you cut his throat. What would you vote on that, Jeremy?
I will definitely never vote that. You know why?
Why?
Because what you are putting in scenario is a false dilemma. Because it's never worked like that. You don't have to choose between continue to exploit animals and exploit animals in a way that provoke to them less suffering. It doesn't. There is no this only two option. There
for
is
us, because we've gone vegan, but for society there is. While this stuff is happening to animals, the point is it's going to happen. We're not going to end it.
That's precisely the point. It's not necessarily going to happen if we go to people and with vegan education we convince them to become vegan. Actually, in 20 years we can create a vegan world. So it's absolutely not only possible, and there is this third option. And think about that, George. No welfare law happen immediately. There is always negotiation, vote, there is thinking between politics. So even the law that you would like to put in place right now will never save the victims who are actually exploited right now. It will always for the future victim. So when we talk about vegan activism, we have to be very clear that it's never for the present victim. It's always for the future. And if it's for the future, everything is possible. So why would we choose to promote and accept animal exploitation and say, we should make them suffer, when we have the possibility to say, no, we don't want animals to be enslaved. We want animals to be free.
Okay. So maybe I can just put across like a framing that I was planning on doing at the start of this. So for one thing, I believe that most welfarists actually are abolitionists. That there's like an agreement on the end goal that people who are dedicating. I mean, I know people who are dedicating their lives to welfare reform, who are they're vegan, and they want to see a world where there's no violence to animals.
Yeah, so I think we acknowledged that early on. Those would be neo-welfarists, but obviously the non-vegan welfarists, like
yeah, and
Temple Grandin,
also,
who you had, she doesn't
Yeah.
want an end to it. She just wants it. She's happy to have it happen.
Yeah, that exists too. And but I think in like the animal rights movement, this is like age-old debate, right? Where like the abolitionists worry that the welfarists are like settling for far less than animals deserve, like bigger cages or no cages, and then the welfarists worry that the abolitionists care more about like their moral purity and consistency rather than actually getting wins for animals. But my take is that the animal movement needs to be a diverse ecosystem with like lots of different people pushing for like different theories of change in order to get animal liberation. So when you say neo-welfarism is the belief that like welfarism will achieve animal liberation for animals, I don't think any reasonable welfarist on the planet thinks that welfarism alone will achieve like animal liberation for animals. I don't think any one strategy will. I think we need like a diverse ecosystem that are working together. And I actually think that the welfarists and the welfarists and abolitionists, the insiders and outsiders, are actually helping each other get things done. So like the radicals, the people like on the outside of the industry who are having radical messages, we're shifting the Overton window so it becomes more likely that we can have radical changes in society. And then you have insiders who are like putting that public pressure and that Overton shift into like policy and institutional changes that help animals today. So I think each side actually make each other more effective. And I think that, okay, so maybe I'll quickly, and I understand I'm talking a lot here, but I'll quickly make the case as to why I think welfarism will help lead to animal liberation. And I think like one simple thing you can make that kind of helps the vegans is that so the industry is currently like aiming to do whatever it can to like optimize profits. Without legislation, it would just optimize profits, right? When we enforce legislation on the meat industry, it becomes less financially viable. The cost of products go up. So that's one thing. But I think more importantly, in this kind of insider-outsider game that I'm describing, the insiders, even though they're like being way more moderate than Jeremy or even themselves want to be, they are building the infrastructure and relationships in policy and institutions so that when the time does come that we can get more radical asks on the table, they're there to help push it through.
Can I just so conversely though, the more idyllic animal farming becomes, the more attractive it becomes though to the consumer and even to the farmer who wants to work in the business. So
there is empirical research. So I think it can sound intuitive to say that like, welfare reform is like propagating the humane myth, right? And in some cases, Temple Grandin clearly is doing that. So it can happen. But I think that there's now empirical research showing that when people are given information to read of welfare reforms, this actually doesn't reduce their opposition to animal farming. So there's research, I can stick it in the chat if anyone wants to read it. But that's an empirical question, right? Of like, does welfare reform make people more complacent, make them less likely to be against animal farming? And I think the empirical evidence shows that's just not true.
Well, it's absolutely the opposite. We have no empirical proof that new welfarism can lead to a vegan world. Think about that, Jack. It's 10,000 years that we exploit animals. It's 10,000 years that we are welfarist. We have always been preoccupied for animals to not suffer at one point. It's 200 years that we are actively promoting welfarism. Think about that, Jack. The RSCPA was born in 1924 in England. And their
I was
fight...
going to say that the welfare, the kind of insider welfarist is like extremely like weak and underfunded compared to like what it's up against, which is the meat industry. I think both angles of the movement, the like welfare moderates and the radical abolitionists, are both like underdeveloped in the current world, you know.
Well, let me just finish my point because you will see what I want to say. In the 1824, the RSCPA was created in England, and their first fight was to try to make horses be less impacted by their exploitation, right? So it was basically the idea that we want to be less cruel with horses, right? It's 200 years that we have done that. Do we see horse be less exploited right now? Absolutely not. Horses are still exploited and more than ever. They are used for sport, they are used for many things, they are used as cars. So we have to understand one thing. Welfarism or neo-welfarism comfort the public with their participation to animal exploitation. Why? Because it never touched the root cause, speciesism. We are already welfarists, guys.
But so that's where vegans come in, though, Jeremy. Because this is, I think, this is one of the things I think that the super hardcore anti-neo-welfarists will need to convince people of is, you know, why we can't be radically anti-speciesist and radically anti-abolitionist while at the same time promoting the extremely important idea that animals are suffering, feeling, thinking beings, and that, you know, quite obviously, in the eyes of anyone who cares about animals, we should do whatever it takes to ease their suffering while an oppression is taking place. I really want to nail that point home about just how you can really go super hardcore. Let's say you had an activist who was like 90% of their messaging was just super hardcore. End this now. There's no nice way to do this. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. But 10% of their activism was just like, yes, lower their like suffering and take the vote to ban gestation crates in the pork industry. What's wrong with what that activist would be doing?
Absolutely, great question. And what's wrong is because it's precisely the opposite. Because when you say reduce suffering, it comes from a good intention. I understand that it comes from a good intention. Emotionally, we want to help animals. We are shocked by that. It's okay. But good intention doesn't change the world. When we focus on reducing suffering, we are basically accepting the fact that they are exploited. Think about the woman. Again, it's very simple, the topic, guys. If you were exploited, George, would you want me to try to reduce your suffering, or would you want me to liberate you from slavery?
Absolutely, to liberate me from slavery. But if it's guaranteed to happen, if you can't liberate me, I would really, really want you to reduce my suffering.
Absolutely. And not only it's possible, we can do that in 20 years, but it's the only thing to do, because we can not even talk about strategy when we are violating the interest and the right of people. I can say that I will sacrifice innocent beings for a goal that is judged as good, because I am just violating these individuals. And if you are the victim, and there is an animal defender who say to you, okay, I will let these people kill you, I will let these people abuse you, but don't worry, because the future of your brother, I will free them. But you, yes, I will make you exploit and cut your throat, but don't worry, it's for a good cause. We cannot tolerate that. If we want animal liberation, we have to say it. We cannot even say that it's okay to promote animal liberation, because if we do that, we are the same as non-vegan. We are exactly the same. Non-vegans believe that it's okay to exploit animals because they have the pleasure to eat animals, for example. Vivisection says that it's okay to experiment on animals because we have a knowledge, scientific knowledge. We gain a scientific knowledge. And neo-welfarists say it's okay to exploit animals because somehow, by a magical idea, we will lead to abolishing their slavery.
That's not what neo-welfarists are saying. They're saying it's not okay to exploit animals. But just welfarists are saying it is. Neo-welfarists in the vegan movement are saying we want the abolition of it and there's no nice way to do it. But obviously we want their suffering to be appeased while it's happening.
Exactly. They can say that in their head. But what they say to the public, it's precisely we accept animal exploitation and we promote it. Because when you say to people, just reduce the suffering of this industry or this form of exploitation, you are actually saying to non-vegan that you are accepting. Maybe you think in your head, George, that it's wrong, but the message that you send is a message of acceptance of animal exploitation, and you promote it. If you accept it, you promote it. And this is the problem.
Jeremy, are you not the one, though, saying to the pig in the gestation crate, don't worry, I can't liberate you now, but I will liberate your brothers and sisters in 20 years. However, but for you, while you're here right now, you are going to be stuck here. And no, I'm not going to vote to ban the social. Is that not the cruel thing to say to that pig?
In the both case, as I have said before, we cannot do anything, guys, for the present victim. We have to very understand this precise idea. The present victim will die alone in an extreme suffering. We can't do anything for them except direct action. But direct action can save 1, 2, 100 animals. We cannot have we cannot save the billions of animals. The only thing that we can do is always for the future victim, Jack. So if we do that for the future victim, we have a choice, guys. We have a choice, and everything is possible. A vegan world can be achieved in 20 years. If one person convinces just another to become vegan and the other person does the same, we double the number of vegans every year. In 20 years, it's done. So what argument would you oppose to that?
I have a few questions. I guess like my first question is that genuinely the theory of change? Like you genuinely think that we convince each individual to go vegan and that will have a ripple effect, and in 20 years it'll be a vegan world because everyone's been convinced by the ethical arguments of anti-speciesism?
Absolutely. If I convince you, Jack, for example, if you are not vegan, if I convince you to go vegan in 1 year, just one person, it's very easy. It's not very exaggerated, right? 1 year, one person. You become vegan and you convince also one person in 1 year. And the person that you have convinced do the same. We double the number of vegans. So if we are, for example, 1,000 vegan today, in a little bit more than 20 years, we have a vegan world.
But that relies on the effectiveness of like the vegan outreach, and I would argue that the evidence suggests it's not getting there. I mean, like in evidence? UK, so in the UK, the data suggests that the number of vegans has been pretty much stable for the last 15 years.
Because we don't have vegan education.
Yes, we do. We have one of the biggest like grassroots animal advocacy communities in the world, as well as some of the best. Well,
Humane Hancock.
But we have had that's how I got started. I mean, it was like a huge like grassroots pull of animal Anonymous for the Voiceless. Like the UK is a bit of a hub for animal activism, and we also have some of the best like alternative proteins here and like plant-based products as well. And we have like a culture of like there is some truth to the idea that we're a nation of animal lovers. Like the public are like much more sympathetic to animals than they are in the likes of well, I don't want to get cancelled. But okay, so yeah, I mean, I think there's a big disagreement between us where I just don't believe that we can convince the world through ethical arguments to go vegan. And there'll be this.
It's not convince the world. It's one person, and if you do that with one person in 1 year, it's. But even Jack, even if it's more complicated than you think, and even if it's 100 years, even if it's 1,000 years, we have the moral obligation to not promote animal exploitation. If you use animals, if you use innocent beings, and you sacrifice them by saying, "Oh, I do that because maybe one time I will save your brother," you are a betrayer of animals. And this is the problem with the vegan movement today. It's because we have all this organization, PETA, Mercy for Animals, Vegan Outreach. They have millions of funding from the people who are non-vegan. And they just say to people, we should ban experimentation on animals. We should change the way animals are exploited. Every time you do that, you betray animals. If you are a victim, you want to be liberated, not exploited in another way. So I want to make clear, guys, that even if it's hard, and we can discuss about the number, I say 20 years, maybe you think it's harder, Jack, but it's possible. We are agreed that it's possible.
I don't think so. I don't think it will work.
Okay, but it doesn't matter, because even if you think that it will take a longer time, it's the only option that we have. Because if you justify to sacrifice innocent beings for an end judge good, then you have nothing to say against slavery, against raping.
I would argue that your theory of change is going to be ineffective and betraying animals, because it's leading to what's happening to continue indefinitely, because I just don't think that's going to be possible. So like we have this huge disagreement. Yeah, we have this huge disagreement on like you're convinced that like vegan outreach of individuals is the way to completely solve anti-speciesism. So that's one disagreement we have. But I want to ask you some more questions, I guess, about your view. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so if which country are you in?
France.
So if France had a referendum, a vote on abolishing the boiling alive of lobsters, for example, are you voting to ban it?
No, because it's the same with slavery, human slavery. We have retarded the abolition of human slavery when we have abolished the trade in 1877. Right? Wilberforce was thinking in his head, if we stop the ship to go from Africa to America, then we will destroy the slavery itself. It has never led to the destruction of slavery. When you look at history, when you read historians like Byron Davis, he explained that this law of abolishing just one part of the violence of slavery have led the population to say, okay, now we have resolved the problem. There is no problem anymore. And the idea that we have the right to enslave someone was completely eliminated. People don't think about that. And Elizabeth Hendricks, who come from England, say, stop the bullshit. It was in 1824. And she say, this doesn't lead to the abolition of human slavery. We have to be radical. We have to ask immediate abolition of slavery. And this have works. When we say a clear message and when we do it with force, with people, this have led to the abolition of slavery.
So you think that you think that banning the boiling alive of lobsters would actually make it harder to achieve animal
exactly
liberation?
because it doesn't question the right to exploit I see speciesism.
I see speciesism, I guess, as like a spectrum, and I would say, like, considering the interests of lobsters, so they're not boiled alive, is why are you laughing, George? Because I used the word spectrum. Come on, it's 2025.
Carry on.
Okay, so let's flip it then. I mean, like, if you're saying that, like, you think that not boiling lobsters alive would get us further away from animal liberation, if would you prefer, like, if there was a vote to start boiling lobsters alive or to get rid of stunning of animals in slaughterhouses? To be consistent, surely you'd have to say that, yeah, being more brutal to animals, let's start boiling them alive. Let's stop using electrical stunning. That would get us closer to animal liberation because it kind of doesn't reinforce speciesism somehow.
It doesn't. Think about that fur campaign. We think that by eliminating fur, we go next to a vegan world. It's the opposite. Every time you think we can talk about bullfighting, we can talk about fight with dogs, we can talk about fur. Every form of exploitation that people they are quite a majority to say we don't want that, even if they are not vegan. You can eliminate that as you want.
Jeremy,
this will never lead this will never lead to abolishing the idea that we have a right to exploit animals. If you don't make this mentality work, you can do anything. It will never stop.
Okay, so
Hancock's question was more specifically, Jeremy, if say we weren't boiling lobsters alive and there was a vote to boil lobsters alive, Hancock is saying you would need to vote to boil lobsters alive to be consistent.
No, it's a false dilemma. We don't have to regulate exploitation. We have to free people from the root cause of why we exploit animals. Why we exploit animals? Because we think that it's okay, animals are inferior, we have a right to do that. Every time you focus on the superficial consequence of speciesism, again, the branch, guys, we don't do anything. We believe that we can do something because we are emotionally invested. I understand you, Jack. You are emotionally invested to the animals, and it's great. But use this power that you have. This is your power. Use it for eliminate animal exploitation by having a vegan message and focus on the root cause. You will change the world.
Jack, can you explain why, in order... You claimed that Jeremy, in order to be consistent there, would have to vote to boil the lobsters alive. Why is it that you believe he would need to do that to be consistent?
Yeah, because he's saying the world in which we stop boiling lobsters alive is pushing us away from a vegan world.
Yeah, because it's eliminate, it discard us from this idea that we have the right to exploit animals. Because when you say to people, "Oh, great, we have stopped this practice," what non-vegans say? They say, "Oh, great, let me eat a steak, let me drink a drink of milk." These have no evidence, Jack, between eliminating one form of slavery and eliminating this belief that we think that it's okay to enslave animals. There is no connection at all. It's 10,000 years that we are welfarist. It's 200 years that we push welfarism with a lot of conviction, and there is no part of the world which is vegan. But you have mentioned education, if I just can say one word to that. And you say maybe education doesn't really work, but we don't have experience in education. AV, it's only few years that they exist and they have a vegan message. And they make a works that create actually a lot of vegans. If you, Jack, with your YouTube channel, you have some followers, you talk about veganism, you will reach people. You can convince a lot of people to become vegan. I want to do the same also with my channel. George, you can use your power also to do that. We don't have study about the effectiveness of vegan education because vegan education have never existed in the world.
But Jeremy, if you think that lowering animal suffering will push us away from a vegan world,
absolutely,
why would you not vote to increase animal suffering?
It's ridiculous because it's not that I don't want to reduce animal suffering. Of course, if I can choose between suffer more and suffer less, obviously I will think to choose the suffering less. But this is a false dilemma because there is liberation, and we have to think about liberation, not to think about exploiting better. If we think about exploiting better, we are pushing us away from the abolition of animal liberation. It's very simple.
So for you, it's like you take almost like, to use an analogy, it'd be like in politics with anarchists. It's like for you, just voting at all, either way, is the problem. Whether you say cause more suffering to animals or whether you say cause less suffering to animals, just the idea of going into that booth and saying yes or no to that, that's, as an anarchist would say in politics, that's like encouraging the bastards or whatever. And it's like, it's kind of, it's playing into the system. Is that your kind of point?
Exactly. We are collaborationists. We are betrayer if we just think that by changing the way animals are exploited or just banning just a certain form of animal exploitation, we will go to a vegan world, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. The slavery, the transatlantic slavery, have shown us that this gradualism reform lead us away from the abolition of slavery, and it only work when you destroy the root cause. You cannot promote animal exploitation as because when you talk about reducing suffering, George, I want to be clear for everybody, because this seems a very positive language. Reducing suffering. Who wants to increase suffering? Nobody. So it's very easy for people to say, oh yeah, I want to reduce suffering. Why not? Of course, I want also to reduce suffering. But this is not the point. Because when you talk about reducing suffering, you are saying, I want animals to be exploited and murdered in another way.
Is that maybe not black and white thinking though? Like, because
maybe
Jack isn't saying that if he goes to the booth. He's not saying he wants
Maybe you don't think that, but it's what your message sent to the public.
I think that, like, for you to not vote in favor of like lobsters not to stop being boiled alive is like only possible because of the disconnect we have between like our experience and the experience of the lobster going through that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This I really empathize with all the victims, and it's precisely because I really empathize with all the victims that I know this is a nightmare. I really know that, Jack. That I push for vegan education, because if you think just about lobsters, after you will go fur, after you will go bullfighting, you will never abolish anything, because you are on the superficie of speciesism. You are not attacking the root, and anytime you are not attacking the root, Jack, you don't permit people to understand why they should become vegan. And if people don't become vegan, we don't have a vegan world. This is very simple.
Jeremy, there was a great question. I've got it starred here in the chat, so I can ask you it. It's from another Jeremy in the comments. I want to hear your answer to this. The analogy with assaults on women makes the opposite point. Does Jeremy think we should oppose rape alarms on university campuses?
What is it, rape alarms? It's when there is a woman who...
There are these little devices that women carry that unfortunately have to be handed out in some places for women's safety. So university campuses might give female students free rape alarms. And they're these things that you throw on the floor and they go if they get attacked on the street.
Absolutely not. Why could anybody think about opposing these great tools? It's a protection. It's a protection tools. It's a self-defense. This has nothing to do with saying publicly that we should give men a drug like that women suffer less. This has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, maybe Jeremy could have used a different analogy there, because as far as I'm aware, the rape alarm is like a self-protection tool. And
absolutely,
Jeremy would vote to give the chicken the crowbar, right?
But I mean, trying to like create legislation to like abolish the sexual assault or rape of a woman isn't, I think, according to like Jeremy's view, like the root structure. It's not addressing sexism. It's a single issue behavioral change. It's kind of like voting to ban that is like voting to ban boiling lobsters alive.
No. It depends on what we talk. We have to be very clear. If you vote for give to men a drug to put in the drink of women like that, they suffer less. This is exactly what we do with animals when we want to have bigger cage. We are actually not addressing the root problem, which is exploitation, which is rape. And we are saying, let's do it in another way that makes the public feel more comfortable. This is a betrayal of animals, right? Now, if you have a law who say all women should be respected, and we have to abolish the rape of women, and this is great, right? So the only law that can be respectful for animals, there is only one, and it's a law who say the exploitation of animals is abolished. All the other law will be speciesist, because it's just one animal, will be partial, and will be welfarist.
So I guess where I'm at is that I just don't feel like I don't feel convinced that promoting welfarism is like a hindrance to abolition, or as you put it, like the biggest barrier towards achieving animal liberation. And I think that if you look at like the country, so obviously there's a lot of differences in like the welfare legislation in different countries. You have some countries like the UK or Norway or Switzerland that are actually much better in terms of welfare regulation compared to others. And in the countries like in the countries with the higher welfare regulation, I think you see a larger number of like animal rights activists. And in some cases, like you've seen, I mean, look at Switzerland. Switzerland has one of the best animal welfare legislations in the world. And they had a referendum, a vote on whether to abolish factory farming. So that goes against this narrative that having welfare reform makes it less likely that we're going to get like abolitionist policies in play.
Absolutely not. This go in the same sense, because first of all, we have to understand one thing. All the study who make the recensement, who write the number of vegan in one country, what is the question they ask for the people to say they are vegan or not? They ask to people, what is your diet? What is your diet? This is not veganism. You can be plant-based and say I am vegan with this kind of study.
Sure, that's missing my point, though.
No. But because there is this idea that welfare reforms lead to more vegan in one country. The more there is welfare reform, the more there is vegan.
I'm not talking about even veganism right now. I'm saying that there was a vote to abolish factory farming in Switzerland.
Yeah.
The country with one of the highest welfare.
Exactly. And this has nothing to do with animal liberation, because if you abolish factory farm, you will have local farm. And you will reinforce the exploitation and the slavery of animals forever.
Jeremy, you're not going to tell me that if there was a vote to abolish factory farming, you wouldn't vote in favor of abolishing it.
Not only I will tell you that I will not vote for that, but I will tell you that if you do that, and it's not funny, you will reinforce animal slavery forever, because what you will say to the public, you will say it's okay to exploit animals if it's not done in an industrial way. No, it's not wild. It's what happened. It's the psychological effect. We have slavery of the transatlantic slavery when they have banned the sheep from go to Africa to America. What do you think happened? Do you think slavery was eliminated? Absolutely not. Slavery was reinforced because,
Here's the thing. I do think, Jeremy, you have a point that it could reinforce that idea, and I have a study that I want to tell Jack in a second to show that. But from an economic viability perspective, Jeremy, abolishing factory farming is huge, because that's how most animal products need to be farmed without factory farming. You mentioned the second scenario, which is everyone would have these small local farmers, but that's not actually possible. We don't have the space to rear grass-fed cows and all this kind of stuff. In order for the meat industry to operate, you have to have factory farming to feed 8 billion people. If we abolish factory farming, that's fucking huge. Like so much farming is going to...
Because you think in the short term. I understand you, George. but you think in the short term. Of course, in the short term, one who would say, "Oh, why?" Like your reaction, Jack. Why do you think that? It can be crazy to think that because we think in the short term. When you do that, you think it's gonna lead to the abolition. It will never lead to abolition. People will just feel more comfortable about eating the same animals and the same product from other country. Because when you say to me, Jack, that people vote, they theoretically say that they are against industrial farm and they would eventually vote for that, what do they eat instead in the meantime? Do you think that they eat just local farm? It's exactly the same. And the problem is not local farm or industrial farm. The problem is slavery. So anytime you think that by eliminating one form of animal exploitation, you will go eliminate the other, it's a mistake because you don't eliminate the root cause, again, the right to exploit.
I think that like the whole question of like they'll eat imports is like that's not what we're discussing here, because even if there were a vote to worldwide abolish factory farming, presumably you wouldn't vote in favor of it, right?
Absolutely, because this will reinforce. Absolutely.
Sure.
But why, Jack? We have to understand why. Because when you do that, you will reinforce the idea.
I hear that.
And my question to you, Jack, because I have talked much, but my question to you is how eliminating industrial farming will lead to people to think that animal exploitation itself is wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So a few things there. Firstly, like eradicating like trillions of beings from being like tortured in factory farms, that itself is, I think, extremely morally important, regardless of like this question of whether it helps or hinders on the move to animal liberation. I think that's like incredibly important. Like if I had to live through that, trillions of lives of torture on a factory farm, then I'd be begging that, like, it's just, that's morally important, regardless of what we think here. On the question of like whether getting rid of factory farming will like hinder or help the goal of animal liberation,
and to think
that's an empirical question that we have to explore. But because there's so much torture being prevented on this one side, you better be damn confident that this is hindering the movement to animal liberation in order to vote against it. But wait. So like, okay, go on.
I want to put that study to you, and I asked you this a few years ago, and I can't remember what your answer to it was, but there was a country, or maybe it was a supermarket, some kind of entity banned caged eggs. And the result of that was that demand for eggs went up because you now had free-range eggs. It was only free-range eggs, either in this country or the supermarket.
Exactly.
People bought more eggs.
Exactly.
Do you know the study that I'm talking about, and how would you respond to that?
So you said so a welfare reform went through that made things cage-free, and the demand for eggs went up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're directly linking that to welfare reform.
Well, I'm asking you what your response to that is, because Jeremy, I guess, would use that as a very strong case for what he's saying.
Exactly.
Right. So I mean, one thing worth pointing out here is that like no two welfare interventions are the same. There could be some cases, I guess, where like welfare reform actually leads to more demand, and then there could be cases where it leads to less demand because it increases the prices and things. That's an interesting piece of evidence that like points towards welfare reform leading to more demand. So like that's interesting, and I think there's like research that goes in the other direction. Yeah.
And you have not responded to. Yeah, sorry, George.
What is the research that goes in the other direction?
Right. Well, like So the research I was describing earlier is that they took participants and they gave them some reading to do. There was like some reading that's just like irrelevant, like read about the baseball game or something, and then there's read about this welfare reform that's been conducted over the last few years, and the group that read about welfare reform didn't have less opposition to animal farming. So it kind of suggests that the general public being exposed to welfare reform, to the idea that we've been making progress for animals, doesn't actually make people less likely to like oppose animal farming.
Oppose animal industrial farming, not oppose local farming. This is the problem, because when we make welfare reform, we have to understand also the problem of this term, welfare. Welfare is exploitation. Welfare is positive. Oh, welfare. But no, it's exploitation. When we talk about welfare, we talk about animal exploitation. This is one thing. And second thing, every time you do that, you will give to people the idea that it's okay to exploit animals. Jack, we have to help people to understand why it's wrong to exploit animals, not how we do it. Right? You are agree with that? I imagine, right?
Yeah, I just think it's a bit more complicated in that like things like behavior and.
Oh, okay, you think it's complicated, but I think about justice, about moral, and if we can agree that if we have a message that promotes the injustice, we shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is very important. After we can talk about if it's possible or not. And I can assure you that it's very possible. And if you use your channel, Jack, and George, you use your channel, and I use my power, and AV and all the organizations that are actually doing a great job, we can do a fucking vegan world in our lifetime, guys. This is fucking possible. But if you are not convinced by that, we can talk about that. There is no problem. But let's first have the right message, guys. Because if we are not have the right message, if we are still promoting animal exploitation, we will never help people to understand why it's wrong.
I want to ask Jack, actually. Jack, if there was a vote to ban gestation crates for pigs, but you knew that the result of that ban would mean, despite the pigs suffering less, more people would buy bacon, as what happened with the egg thing, what would you vote?
I'd struggle.
Get those utilitarian calculation wheels spinning in your head, Jack.
I'd struggle with that. I mean, yeah. I'm not sure. I'd have to spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you have not responded to my question, Jack.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, my question was by how magical tricks do welfare reform will help people to understand why it's wrong to exploit animals.
Yeah, so maybe I'll use the example of like factory farming as a welfare reform, which you would vote against.
Yeah, sure.
So like, for one thing, I think that when the public, say if the public were to take a vote to ban factory farming, and it breaks into the kind of mainstream conversation, and we have this huge change of infrastructure change, and I think that reinforces the idea that animals are moral patients, that they matter.
Yeah.
I also think that like abolishing factory farming would inevitably mean that lots of people are having to drastically reduce their animal product consumption or eliminate it. And I think that when we eat animals, it messes with our psychology in a way that makes us more likely to disregard the interests of animals. And there's empirical evidence for this as well, that people who are eating animal products, or even expecting to eat animal products, actually rate animals to be less sentient, less intelligent. So I think that getting people away from eating animals through abolishing factory farming, basically these 2 points, I think, will just have huge cultural effects that make people wake up to the atrocity of animal farming.
Okay, you have
Yeah.
talked about not eating animals, but you have not explained why people will not eat animals if you talk about welfare reform.
Because there
You
isn't
have
enough
talked about
supply. There isn't enough supply when you get rid of factory farming. We
But you
can't
have
feed that many.
you have talked about reducing. You have talked that this can lead to reducing the consumption of people. You have talked about the fact that this could lead people to have to think about animals more. But the point is not to think about animal more. The point is not to think about reducing the consumption. The point is to stop seeing animals as slaves and to recognize that they have a right to exist. So you can reduce your consumption. You can think more if you want about animals, but if it's not in the good direction, it doesn't lead to a vegan world.
Well, I think that like realizing that animals are like moral patients, that what happens matters to them, and that we should give more consideration to them is leading us closer to like a vegan world.
And what evidence do you have to that? Because welfarism is exactly that. We think that animals are
Yeah.
moral patient, and we recognize that they have an interest to not suffer. So we think about animals, but what we don't recognize is that they have an interest to be free. And this is very different from thinking about the interest of not suffering.
I think
what
that
do you
like
make,
attitudes. So I think that attitudes towards animals over like the span of human history has improved greatly. I mean, you
Absolutely
talk,
not.
Yeah, you don't think that public attitudes towards animals as victims has improved over the last 200 years?
Absolutely not. We have always exploited animals since 10,000 years, and we are always welfarist. 99% of people are not vegan. 99% think that the problem is not the fact that we exploit animals, but why we do that. So, and in fact,
I know. If you go to like back to the Middle Ages, it used to be the case that they would like get loads of cats in a bag at a celebration and throw them on top of a bonfire. And all the public would laugh and cheer as the cats were screaming. If you look at today's world, like in the UK, I mean, people recognize way more now that animals are like moral patients who matter, and it's only because all of the atrocities are like behind closed doors, out of sight, out of mind, that they're okay with this kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I think attitudes have really improved over time, and we're closer today to like a vegan world than we are 200 years ago.
This is here where there is a misconception, because yes, people are more concerned with animals, but for the welfare of animals. They want animals to be exploited, but in a less painful way. So this goes in the wrong direction. And we have, as a vegan, to focus the direction of people in the freedom direction, not in the less painful way of exploiting them.
So I think that I do want to let you come in, George, because you were saying before, but I'll just say, I think that there are some like, not just differences in empirical questions, but between me and Jeremy, also probably some like value differences where for me, like all moral value tends to come down to like the experiences of sentient beings, the conscious experiences. So the reason that I think the use of animals is bad is exactly because it's not in the animal's interests, because it affects their well-being. So I'm pointing out that I think there are some value differences between us as well.
I don't think, yes, I think there is value difference, and I think it's contradictory to what your opinion is about human slavery. And this is a blind spot, because you have talked about the expression blind spot. I love that. In your speech, it's a great talk. And you talk about the fact that this man have saved this child, Snail Grave, but he have a blind spot because he doesn't see the unfairness of slavery, right? So you was recognizing, Jack, that slavery itself is wrong regardless of how the victim feels. Even if the victim is happy, slavery will still be wrong. Do you agree with that, Jake?
I don't believe, well, I just don't believe that like enslaving a human being is ever going to be the best thing for their well-being.
But if it was the case, would you be for slavery?
It's like asking me if raping a woman was like the best way to improve their well-being. It's like, well, these things are just clearly against each other. Do you know what I mean?
But if it was the
like,
case,
okay, if enslaving the world, oh God, it's just such a galaxy brain thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Stop
breaking my
dodging the
utilitarian
hypotheticals,
calculator.
Jack. Look, to give credit to Jeremy's question here, he's just saying, to what extent do you think rights violations matter if that rights violation actually does improve life?
Right. I don't think rights
right
violations matter in and of themselves.
So you don't think that slavery? Wait a minute, George. So if you say that, you are saying that you are not opposing slavery or rape.
Of course I am, because it's
Why?
awful it's awful for human well-being.
Okay, so if it was not awful and if the victim would be happy, would
But
you
it is.
agree with? Yeah, but if we can make the victim less painfully. We can inject drugs in their head. We can imagine scenario where the victim will have absolutely no conscience of what happened, and they will be more happy that you being free and being a lot of stress with the freedom. So what do you have to oppose to that, Jake?
Because because in reality that kind of thing just wouldn't work out. I mean, we're living in a society where we're watching
Hold on, Jack. There are scenarios, and I asked you this a few years ago. There are scenarios where a horrific thing happening to you can actually massively improve your life in some way. Just as an example, like a horrific rights violation happening to you can improve your life. So the example I used was, did you watch Leaving Neverland with Michael Jackson?
I did, yes, yeah.
Let's say those two guys on it are telling the truth, right? Let's say they were raped repeatedly by Michael Jackson as a child, but they both get $500 million payout as a result of that, and their life becomes fucking insane. Like they're living in a mansion, swimming pools, blah blah blah. Would you be happy for them that it happened? Because their life.
I mean, I actually think their well-being would have been better off if they never got sexually assaulted and had less money.
Jack, if you had the proof that someone, if you have the proof that someone who is raped or someone who is enslaved have more well-being than less, then you will agree?
It's just so far from reality that
I just take your philosophy. Take your philosophy and push it to the limit. It's exactly the limit of your philosophy. You say that if there is less suffering.
We're living in a culture where like there are knock-on effects to these kinds of things. If you isolate one individual and say this horrific thing happened to them improves their life, but the rest of us have all got to live in that culture and witness it and feel fear because of it and feel that there's an injustice because of it. In reality, it's great that we have like stigma around all these awful things. And the reason these things are awful is because it's going against like the interests of the beings affected. So like when it comes to non-human animals, animals don't have a concept of like exploitation in their head like you do. They're not thinking about like the Leslie Cross definition of veganism. They're concerned with things like, how can I get enough food? How can I look after my children? How can I like avoid pain and suffering? That's what their world contains. And I think that the true like anti-speciesist framing is to put ourselves in the perspective of the victim and say like what is in their best interests.
Okay, so you are reducing animals into just living beings who mainly wants to not suffer and to eat and to be with their family, but that's absolutely not the case. Animals are exactly like us. They want to be free. You have not talked about freedom. They want to be free. They don't want to be constrained into 4 barriers. They are actually like us. So maybe they don't understand the concept of freedom. You are absolutely right. But they want to be free. They have this interest, right? And this is a very big difference between our philosophy, is that you think that if somehow slavery or raping someone would lead to a better feeling in their life, if it's the case, if we prove it to you, then you will have nothing to oppose to that. And this is the problem with utilitarianism. Because with utilitarianism, there is no boundaries. And veganism is precisely here to put boundaries, to say we don't have the right to exploit animals, regardless of how the victim feels.
But do you go as far as to say, like the crosscut guys are saying, Jeremy, that utilitarianism is just 100% incompatible with animal rights? Or do you think...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a lot of difference with the dogmatic vegan groups, the one that I called, and I have many things to oppose with them, and I talk to that about in my book. But they are completely right in the opposition to utilitarianism. And this is a very interesting topic, guys, because utilitarianism is the opposite of the very concept of justice. Because the very concept of justice is to not treat someone as a means to an end. And utilitarianism have no problem with treating everybody as means to an end, as long as it is for a good goal and that there is less suffering. So utilitarianism permits people to be sacrificed, to be murdered, to be abused, if it's for a good goal. And Jack, you will never accept that to you. If I take your life right now and I say to you, but don't worry, it's for the good, you will never accept that.
Well,
So
I
utilitarianism.
wouldn't believe you.
So if you believe me, you will accept it?
Or it might be. It might depend on how good the outcome is. Like if you were to have to murder Jack to end the animal holocaust, Jack might accept that.
I'd say totally, mate. Do it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put my address in the chat now.
Yeah, but maybe you, Jack, you will accept it, and it's great. It's great to have this sense of sacrificing. But you give your consent to that. Animals have never never gave their consent. Animals who are cut in their throat in the slaughterhouse have never gave their consent for vegans to say we should continue to promote animal exploitation as long as less suffering. They have never consented that, and we cannot sacrifice innocent beings for a goal judged positive.
Well, so my intuition is that, like, by saying that you'd vote against banning factory farming or not, or abstain from voting, not pushing through the abolition of factory farming, you're sacrificing trillions of beings to torture because of some kind of like ideology that you've picked up in your head from like reading Leslie Cross.
Yeah, it's absolutely not the case, because you are thinking in the short term. If you think in the long term, with your method, Jack, we will always have victims. We will have trillions and trillions and trillions of victims over the years. In 100 years, in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years, we will always have animal exploitation. So if you think about the long term, and I am sure that you like to think about the long term, I like to think about the long term also, you will have exploitation forever. So if you make a calculation, there will be more victim with this ID in short-term ID that with vegan education. And vegan education, you can have a world in 20 years, as I said.
Whereas I hard disagree. I disagree that we can convince each individual to go vegan and lead to a vegan world. And I disagree with you. And I think that like abolishing factory farming is a necessary step towards achieving animal liberation in the long term.
But look about the human slavery. Sorry, George. You look about the human slavery, transatlantic slavery. When they have eliminated the boat from go to Africa to America, do you think that has led to less slavery?
I'm actually not familiar enough with like
I can
history.
Okay, and that's fine. And I can tell you that I have studied the subject. I have read historian, and it's absolutely the opposite. And that's why. Just I want to read you a quote, guys, from Elizabeth Henrik, who was the leading woman who have abolished the slavery of black people. Unsexful opposition to crime of every description invariably increase their power and malignity.
So hold on, I've starred. Hold on, a message here from David Rams earlier, just so I've got it on my chat here on the right hand side. So Rams actually says transatlantic slavery ended via multiple strategies that included welfarism and reform. Now, I think Tobias Leenart talks about this in his book, How to Create a Vegan World. He goes quite in depth on the slavery stuff, and assuming Leenart is right, that would go very much against your case, I think, Jeremy, with the slavery point you make. It would be the case that slavery only did end because of a combo of those things. It wasn't a pure abolitionist, deontological, whatever message.
Exactly. It certainly wasn't focused on individuals giving up slaves. It was more institutional, right?
Exactly. When you read the manual in school, when you read the institutional story, they will tell you what David Rams say you, because this is a very agradable story. How welfare reform have play a role. In fact, when you read that historian like David Byron, they explain to you that when they have make the stop to boat from go to Africa to America, slavery has increased in the colony, in America, in the island, in Brazil, because there was not support. There is no more slave who go from Africa. So the slaves that are now in the territory, we have to reproduce them, to make them reproduce. And so the value of the slave have increased, and the slaveholder have been more harsh, more controlling about them. They have reproduced them. And so this has led to an increase of the violence of slavery, and the state of England, of Britain, have helped a lot economically the slaveholder. So the idea that the slave abolishing the slave trade have led to the abolishing of slavery is absolutely wrong. This is a myth, actually. And if we look at history, it has increased slave. It has increased the idea that it was okay to enslave people. It has made a sleep effect. And Elizabeth Hendrick said in 1924 that we have to stop this bullshit. We have to ask for immediate abolition. This is what happened, and not the myth that we heard.
Interesting. Well, I'd like to hear Rams respond to that, or Mr. Leonard if he's watching, although he probably won't be. I don't know how much you caught of that, Jack.
Oh, I actually had my headphones in the whole time, so I was listening.
Oh, so you were okay. Yeah. What do you make of Jeremy's idea that it's a myth that welfare reforms and stuff were part of ending the slave trade, and it actually just made stuff worse and increased?
Yeah, so I feel like I would be speaking out of turn to talk about like the historical evidence on like abolishing the slave trade, because I don't know enough. I do know that like lots of smart people have I've read things of them suggesting that like there were like multiple strategies in ending the slave trade, including like welfare reform, but I don't know. I don't really want to make a claim there because I don't know enough about it. But I do have a question for Jeremy, which is like, so right now we have this kind of diverse movement of some people doing welfare reform, so people working on different institutional change stuff, and then we have, I guess, quite a grassroots animal rights contingent who are focused on like vegan outreach. If the welfare reform were to be completely dropped from that, what would you want it to be filled with? Like, is your dream to have every animal advocate on the planet working on vegan outreach?
Absolutely, it will work, and it will lead to a vegan world if they have the right message, and if they trust people, if they are kind and respectful and uncompromising, it will work. Absolutely.
So you wouldn't have people working on alternative proteins, cultivated meat, working in policy.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't lead people to go vegan. It make easier. It make more fun. But in country where you don't have this kind of alternative, there is people who go vegan, and in country where it's there is a lot of alternative, there is people who don't go vegan. So it doesn't really matter.
Cultivated meat is like offers the potential to literally like replace the meat industry with, you know, meat grown from cells, and so people can have what they want, but not involve animals.
Yeah, but for make a cellular meat, you have to exploit animals to have their cells, right? So
currently, yeah.
Guys, Rams has actually offered to join the conversation and speak about the slavery thing. Shall I send Mr. Rams the link to let him speak, even if he's just in here for 5 or 10 minutes? I don't know how long he's planning on staying, but we could have him join in the discussion somewhat. What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm happy with it, but I'll see what
as you want.
Yeah, cool. All right, continue speaking, guys. Sorry to interrupt, and I'll give Rams the link.
Yeah, so I guess we have like very different ideas of what an effective animal movement looks like. Whereas it seems to me that you're like hyper focused on like convince individuals to go vegan. That is how we change the world. My view is that like that should be part of it, but I don't think that should be the face of the movement. I think we're not sure right now what works. I think there needs to be a lot of experimentation. I think that we need to have a diverse ecology of lots of different people working on different strategies to try and bring about change for animals.
I understand you, Jack, but how can you eliminate all this kind of exploitation if you don't eliminate the root cause?
I think that cultivated meat, and getting people off eating animals would be more effective at getting people to be less speciesist compared to talking to individuals. Because, like I said before, I think that when we're eating animals, it messes with our psychology. It creates lots of cognitive dissonance that makes it much harder for us to accept that animals are moral patients and what's happening to them is terrible. And so.
Yeah, but this is just projection that you have, and I don't deny that it can be a link in the emotional way, of course, in the identity. I don't deny that, but you can be a plant-based and not think that animals should have the right to be free. This doesn't matter what you eat at the end of the day. What matters is what you think, and what you think is not necessarily related with what you eat.
Yeah, I think what we think is highly influenced by like the behaviors we take.
There is 1.8 million vegetarians in the world. Why this vegetarian never become vegan? Because they don't eat meat. They sometimes don't eat animal products at all, but they never go vegan. Why they never go vegan? Because they have not eliminated this idea that we have the right to exploit animals. Until you don't help people to eliminate this idea, you can give them what product you want. This will not change their mind.
What would have to happen, like in the world? What would you have to see for you to think that, okay, we're not going to be able to get all the individuals to just go vegan through moral persuasion in the way I'm thinking?
I don't understand your question.
Like, so your current belief, I think, is that like the way we get change for animals, the way we achieve animal liberation is literally like convincing individuals to go vegan. Those individuals then convince other individuals, and it kind of spreads.
Exactly.
And in 20 years, we have a vegan world.
Because this changes the root cause of animal exploitation.
Sure. Yeah. And like, what would change your mind? Like, what would have to happen as you were going about that journey and pursuing that for you to think, actually, I don't think this is working?
But nothing can happen, Jack, because I am on the street. I talk with people. I see them change. AV is on the street. People change. If you talk to people, Jack, I have seen that you have made outreach on the street. Don't you have a feel that people think about what you say?
Mm-hmm.
And when you make great speech, I love your speech. You have a great capacity to talk. I love that. When you make your talk, people think about what you say. So there is no situation where one people who is motivated to help changing the world and speak respectfully to people cannot change the mind of people.
We've got Rams in the room now, but I don't know if he's sorting out his mic and camera or what. But no,
I'm here. I'm just being lazy with the camera because I'm on my laptop. So just mic if it's all right.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'll let Jack respond to Jeremy's question, and then Rams, please come in and make the point you wanted to make.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm not sure what's the question. I don't think there was a question.
Fair enough. All right, well let's have Mr. Rams then. Yeah, tell us. You wanted to speak, I think, on the slavery stuff, or maybe some of Jeremy's points in general.
Yeah, no, so the slavery point that I was making. So basically, I looked into this specifically for the UK, and the abolitionists in the UK, they identified pretty early on that people were very reactive to the idea of abolishing slavery, as in it was just not in the public sphere, the public mindset to do without slaves. And they acknowledged that politically as well as socially, it was an extremely unpopular thing to push. So what they did was what was popular at the time was patriotism, like the national love of the nation. So what they did was they said, well, we should stop trading slaves with other countries because we don't need their slaves. We've got our own slaves. We're our own country. Let's stop letting them control our how we get slaves or whatever. So they played on these nationalist sort of energies, and then they were able to get the trade banned, right? So so the UK would no longer trade. That basically, that was like the first domino that went down. Once that went down, a lot of other things started coming after it. It didn't increase
Absolutely
slavery.
not.
It eventually abolished it. And we can look at the way I would say this. Unfortunately, I feel like the argument that Jeremy might be making here is I've heard people make a similar argument for, like, I've met people who said to me, do you know what? I'm a vegan and I've been vegan for, 4 years now. And I would have been vegan so much sooner if I used to live with a vegan and they were constantly having a go at me and they were constantly making me feel guilty about what I did. And I hated them. And I'm vegan now, but I swear I would be vegan so much faster if it wasn't for that person. And actually, no, that person is likely part of the reason you are a vegan today. Even though you think that they held you back, they actually set you up with the foundation that later on came to fruition, right? And I think that look at the West, slavery is abolished. To say that the welfare reform didn't have a positive impact, it is abolished. Like, it worked. Clearly, it was part of the strategy. It was part of the structure that brought it down. So to say it isn't, you'd have to argue that it would have happened faster without it. And within the UK, for example, like, those reforms were part of the foundation that the abolitionists used reform as a strategy.
Absolutely, they use reform as a strategy, and it didn't work. You can say that.
Do we have slaves today, Jeremy?
What?
Does the UK have slaves today?
There is 4 million slaves today. Why?
Does the UK have slaves today?
What is the matter with the question of the how the transatlantic slavery have been abolished?
No, sorry. Does the UK have slaves today? Yes, it doesn't, right? So obviously,
yes. And what is the matter with the question of the how the transatlantic trade slavery have been abolished?
I'm sorry. I'm referring to the UK at the moment.
Yeah. So Jeremy, the point Rams is making is it is banned in the UK, Jeremy. So you were saying, yes, that slavery still exists today, and it does, but it does not exist in France, the UK, the States.
I don't deny that. What I deny is the fact that the law to abolish the trade was a factor to abolish the slavery. This is where the myth begins. And you can say it, David, you can say that it has been linked to that, but this doesn't prove anything. This is confusing a correlation with a cause. It's not because it happened before that this has led to the abolition. Different historians have a think about this subject, like David Bryan Davis, and they are not agree with this myth, David. They are precisely saying that this have made the population sleep because we have shifted the moral focus from the slavery itself to the way we exploit and we enslave black people. And when you look at Jamaica, when you look at Haiti, when you look at America, slavery have been harder than ever after the trade state. And think about the situation in England in that time. During almost 20 years, activism was dead after the abolishing of the trade because people feel this feeling that it was okay, the problem was solved. So Elizabeth Henrik came here and say, this doesn't work. This has led nowhere, and we have to ask for immediate abolition. And guess what? When she asked to that, in less than 10 years, the slavery was abolished.
Yeah, and your claim is that the reform had nothing to do with changing the politics and changing the society to allow the abolition to happen. And
changing the mindset.
Yeah. No, you're not. You missed my point. Your claim is that the previous abolition of the trade had nothing to do with being able to abolish slavery, full stop. I'm saying that I think that I don't know. I can't see how anyone could take that perspective that of course the reforms had something to do with the abolition. Like it was part of what it took to get it done. If she had said that before the reforms took place, she would have been knocked down and ignored politically and socially, which is why the abolitionists didn't do that, because they knew they wouldn't get anywhere, and they did reform first. So it was part of the strategy that enabled abolition to take place.
And I think something that like an important concept in this is like the concept of the Overton window. Like abolishing the transatlantic slave trade moves the Overton window, and it makes it easier for people to make more radical asks in society as a result.
Yeah, but we can, of course, we can argue a good story, and of course, I don't deny that the abolition of the slave trade have, for example, permit to stop the exportation of slave from Africa. This is a fact. But what I say is that this has not led people to understand and to think about the slavery itself. This has led people to focus on the cruelty. England in that time was not really aware of what happened. And when they heard that slaves was revolting themselves in the Haiti, in Jamaica, there was fighting with slaveholders, they have heard that. And when they have heard these stories, they have been absolutely shocked, because they was thinking, but haven't we abolished the slave trade? So why there is still violence? They have been horrified by what happened. And this story, this realization that the abolition of the trade have not led to abolishing slavery, have profoundly shocked the population of Britain in that time. And that has led to the creation of a radical, immediate abolition of slavery movement.
Exactly. So we agree. That's exactly it. And that's exactly what Jack is saying right now. This whole debate, you actually agree with Jack technically based on what you just said, because what Jack has been proposing the whole time is that welfare reform can get us to a position like the one you've just described, where people say, well, we've abolished all of these things and we thought that would help the animals, but actually, as we see, it's not actually helped them. They're still being slaughtered, they're still being confined, there's still all the things that I didn't like are still happening. So we need to actually abolish the animal food and other systems. We can't just make it better. So that literally, that what you just described as that happened with slavery, the idea that we can just bypass that middle step, that for humans, we needed to do it step by step and there needed to be reforms and whatnot. But for animals, we don't. Humans, it's much easier to get rights for humans than it is for animals. I think we can agree on that. But even the human rights movements had to do things step by step. They couldn't just go in and demand abolition. It didn't work. And every single human rights movement, women's rights, LGBT rights, civil rights, they all required decades and decades of small change. They didn't just go one A to B, right? But when we come to animals, we expect that we will just go A to B. Is that not incredibly naive?
It's absolutely not incredibly naive, Jack. What you said is wrong. You don't have to promote neither animal exploitation, neither a less cruel form of slavery, and a diminished form of slavery for people to understand why it's wrong. It's precisely this thinking that permits the existence of a victim. Every time we think about that, every time we...
Sorry, Jeremy, it's not what I said. Sorry, I need to interrupt. It's not what I said. I didn't say people couldn't understand it. Of course they can understand it. What I'm saying is, in reality, it doesn't work as quickly as A to B, which is why all these other movements had to do things step by step, because it takes time for people to not just fully understand something, but it takes time for them to accept it, and it takes time for them to implement it. And you can't just have people go from living one way to living an entirely different way in a click of the fingers, which is why all these other movements took decades of different strategies and different people asking for different things to get to their ultimate goal. And they didn't just simply demand the same thing, ultimate abolition every single time. They demanded all sorts of different things and met people with all sorts of different, collaborated with all sorts of different people that they might have even disagreed with to get the job done. It's not as clear cut as just we're in black and now we go to white. There is gray, and there's a lot of gray, and there has been for every other movement that involved humans. I can't understand how we can sit here and say that we don't need any of the gray when it comes to animals.
Rams, can I just ask you...
just one response quick, and after I let you, George. David, this has take time for every injustice to be abolished because of the thinking that you are promoting right now. It's precisely because of that this take time. If you explain to people why it's wrong to own a slave, why it's wrong to enslave someone, whether it is an animal or not, people understand.
But history doesn't say that. History doesn't say that at all.
Because history have never used this approach. History have always history have always used this approach that you talk, David, is we have to ask for better treatment inside the slavery. We have to ask for gradual emancipation. It's because of this thinking that things take always time. It's because of
the fundamental reality of human nature and human civilization is that with millions and millions of people, you can't simply demand that they all change on a dime and get what you want. It takes strategy, it takes time. You have to work with different collaborations with different sorts of people that sort of agree with you, that don't agree with you, that agree with one element of what you're talking about, and you have to build upon that. You can't change the entire fabric of society on a dime just because you have an idea that you think is powerful. If that were true, then presidents would just be president just because they have an idea. Like, no, that's why they have to run campaigns to convince millions of people to vote for them, where they do all sorts of various different strategies. They don't just come in and say, I have the answer to everything and everyone agrees with them. They have to convince, and they have to jump through all sorts of different hoops. What's happening here, I think, is a bit of a denial of basic human psychology and human nature. Like we have to play a lot of these. Unfortunately, they are games. We have to play a lot of games with people to get them to
absolutely not. You are a betrayer. If you think.
One second. Has every single person you ever spoke to gone vegan because of you speaking to them? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Then how can you sit there and say all we need to do is tell them to go vegan, tell them the truth, and they'll change? When it's not been the case for you.
Because it's not because one people don't go vegan and the majority don't go vegan in the spot that it's the wrong solution. It doesn't have any relation with that.
That's not what I said. I didn't say it was the wrong solution. I said the strategy obviously didn't work, but you're saying it does work and it will work.
Who said it didn't work? Who says that it didn't work? It's not you will not have a 100% success rate when you talk on the street.
But the way you're talking is like you will, and that's why you're saying Jack.
No, I don't say. David, I don't say that there is a confusion here. When I talk about vegan education and having the right message, I don't say that people will become vegan on the spot and that we will have a 100% rate. I say that it will be.
What rate will we have? If we all do that, what rate will we have?
Well, I don't know what rate will we have. What I know is that if you talk to people and if you help them to understand why slavery of animal is wrong, there is many people who will not go vegan on the spot, absolutely, and there are people who will understand it. If you convince one person in just 1 year to become vegan, this is not absolutely exaggerated. And I think you agree with me. This is not so hard, right? So if you just convince one person to become vegan in 1 year, you can actually create a vegan world in 20 years. What takes time, David, is exactly people who think that we need to promote the very injustice we oppose. If you say that we should have bigger cage, you are betraying animals. And this is why we have more time to abolish the slavery of animals.
Can I ask you a question? If it was proven to you undeniably, this is hypothetical, okay, but let's imagine we actually got some research and it came through and it turned out that actually welfare reform isn't a distraction, and it actually, this is hypothetical, you don't have to shake your head, I know you disagree with this, but it's a hypothetical situation where the news comes in, the report comes in, all right, we've got the answer, here's what we have to do to get to a vegan world the fastest. And let's assume that this hypothetical situation, what gets us to a vegan world the fastest, includes advocating and using welfare reform as a strategy. So then would you be supportive of it in that case?
It will never be the case, David. You can make hypothetical.
not-
No,
I'm
I refuse to.
Jeremy, it's an empirical question, and like there is a possible world where
No.
advocating.
There is no possible world, because look at this tree again.
Jeremy,
If you don't
Jeremy,
have,
sorry.
if you don't, David,
Listen,
you have
I
talked.
respect you. I have massive respect.
David.
I have a lot of respect for you, man. I do, but
David, you have talked. You have talked. You have asked me a question. Let me respond.
It's a yes or no question.
No, it's impossible that saying to people that we should reduce the suffering animals will lead people to think that animal exploitation is wrong. They can become vegan after that, but not because of this message, David. It can be involuntarily.
Yes, I understand. But in this hypothetical, they've proven that there's something we didn't know about the human mind, and they've.
You cannot prove that. You cannot prove that.
Hold on, Jeremy. It's a hypothetical, so you can't change the hypothetical. You have to go along with the hypothetical.
Okay, so let me. Okay. So let me respond to this. If you show me that by promoting animal exploitation, which is absolutely ridiculous claim, you will have a vegan world forever, as that. Ever there is no there will never have animal exploitation again, for sure, but it will never be the case, David. And we can play with this kind of very
all right, well that's enough. Let's have David make his point then. So David, to your hypothetical, Jeremy is saying yes, if in your unrealistic hypothetical, in his eyes, that he would have to vote for welfare if it ended the animal holocaust, he would do it. What's your point that you're trying to make from that?
Well, the point I was getting at is that I've asked this question to various other people, and they've said no. And because it's actually nothing to do with what will work. It's more to do
just
with
dogma,
personal purity. And I'm glad that's not the case for Jeremy, because believe it or not, I've met a bunch of people who have asked the same question to. And they've just said, no, even if it was proven that it would make a vegan world faster, I still wouldn't do it.
Well, we know who those people are. We know who those people are.
David, we can. What is the meaning of this kind of hypothetical scenario?
It's to find out what sort of person I'm talking to. So is it somebody who is more concerned with like purity, or is actually concerned with the outcome? And for you, it's the outcome. So I'm happy that's good in my eyes.
And that's okay. Because here's the thing, Rams, right? So Jeremy, I mean, he said this early on. He does agree with like the crosscut guys on a lot of stuff, but he thinks they're dogmatic. So with Jeremy, that's why I want him in this debate, because he does think that his way of super hardcore anti-neo-welfarism will end the animal holocaust, whereas neo-welfarism will actually prolong it, is the sense that I get from him.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, the reason I asked that question was literally just to ascertain that. That's all.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the same books. And by the way, Jeremy, I was checking you out, and I see that you wrote a book, and I know you've been vegan since 2013. And I have a lot of respect for you. I hope it comes across that I have respect for you. I'm really interested in what you're saying. I'm just trying to stress test it a little bit and push back. I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that. That's all. Just enjoying myself with this. I've been watching the debate. It's nice to be in it for 5 minutes.
No, we've enjoyed your contribution, Rams. We've enjoyed your unrealistic hypothetical being.
I'll duck out. I'll say one thing, then I'll duck out. So what I think is going on, and I know Jeremy, you'll disagree, and I know Jack, you will agree with this. But what I think is interesting here is I think that Jack probably agrees with Jeremy on that the best ways to have people actually, change fully internally, like have a complete change of mind and heart, is if they fully comprehend why to be a vegan for the reasons that matter. I think we're all in agreement on that. I think where you guys are getting conflicted here is that Jack believes that, and I think I agree here, that it's much easier to get people to accept that if they're already doing things that they think are good for animals. Now, we might not think that, for example, if someone goes from buying factory farmed animal products to non-factory farmed animal products, to us, that's like, well, the animal's still enslaved and killed. And, you know, it's not like, for us, it's like, okay, well, you're still doing the bad thing. For them, they feel like they're doing something good. Now, Jeremy, you think that's negative, but I think Jack sees that actually as a positive, because it means they've made, in their eyes, a positive change for animals, which then means when you come to talk to them, Jeremy, and they say, well, I already do the high welfare stuff, and you can say, well, okay, I suppose it's good that you did something. However, here's why that's still, you know, and then you talk about the speciesism and everything, and you have somebody who is already in their mind making positive change for animals, right?
Starting to identify as someone who cares about animals.
Exactly.
David.
So that position is a little more let's say what the word is, sympathetic, as opposed to somebody who blindly does whatever they want all the time and doesn't think about this ever.
David.
Yeah, and I think that also tracks to like a societal level, that if we were to like abolish factory farming, if we have stronger regulation to animals, we promote a culture where we care about animals, where people are growing up and being like, what happens to animals matters.
When we care about the suffering of animals, Jack, it's precisely where the welfare reform leads. They lead to people to care about the suffering of animals, but people already care about the suffering of animals. They need to care about the freedom of animals. And just David Worms, after you go out, just want to say something to you. Do you know the hardest people to convince on the street?
For me, it's been Muslims.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. I have another one. It's vegetarian.
Okay.
And you know why? You know why?
I was going to say, I found vegetarians, for me, to be quite, I don't know, for me personally, I found them relatively easy, because I just work off of the things they already believe. I think vegetarians are difficult if you start telling them that they're not good enough. Then you're coming up against their ego. But if you can like kind of pick on the reasons they're vegetarian and try and expand that I've had more success. But Muslims, I'm pretty much like not like maybe 100, 0 and 100 at this point.
No, you are right. You are right that sometimes you are right that religious people can be very hard to make them understand why it's wrong to exploit animals. And you are also right that there is a lot of vegetarians who are more open, and it's also depends of the way you speak, and you are completely right. But there is a lot of people, my point is that there is a lot of people who are actually eating almost a plant-based diet, and sometimes a full plant-based diet, but that doesn't necessarily means that they will be more open to veganism. It can, but it's not necessarily the case.
To me, I'll leave you with this. To me, somebody who's already eating like that and consuming like that is the lowest priority for me. I probably wouldn't, honestly, part of me even feels like I wouldn't even talk to them, because I would much rather talk to the person next to them than 99% of people who are literally doing nothing for animals. And because if every single person in the world does what they're doing, can you imagine that it would be insane? It would be such a better world. So I am less. How it
will be insane? Animals will still be exploited, abused, and murdered. David,
Jeremy, if we have a person who
it's not about less, it's about stopping animals. Even one victim is a problem.
I agree, but if we have somebody next to us who, if you just told me is consuming in a way that you said, I don't know, like they're pretty much almost consuming plant-based, and you tell me that if we could get the entire world to do that you don't think that would be a positive thing versus what we have now?
Absolutely, because the problem is not the number of victims. The problem is that we think that we have the right to exploit animals, and this is a precise difference that we have, David. I respect you in many ways. I have seen some of your video, and I love the fact that you are very kind and pedagogical. But we have a strong difference here. Is that the problem is not the number of victims that we do. The problem is that we think that we have the right to exploit animals. So obviously, someone who are plant-based can make maybe less victims. I don't deny that. But the problem is that he still are abusing and murdering animals. And this is, we precisely need the same amount of energy for every people. If they are not vegan, they are still participating to animal exploitation.
Yeah, Rams,
I'm
I
not-
take a.
I'll tap out. I'm going to go. I'll just say I'm of the belief that we have extremely limited resources in our movement, extremely limited time. And I just think it should be focused on the areas where we can have the most impact. For me, focusing on people who are, as I said, in that position and giving them as much time and effort as somebody who is, as the like 99% of people who are absolutely not like that. I don't know. I mean, just speaking of in terms of my limited energy and my limited time, then I just can't. I don't know. Maybe it's a difference of I don't know.
Philosophy, moral philosophy.
I've been told many times I have ADHD, so maybe it's something related to that. But to me, I just couldn't.
No.
I can't wrap my head around that. To be honest.
But like, there's this problem you're trying to deal with, and you're saying, well, we should put our resources in a way that addresses most of the problem as effectively as we can. And it seems that Jeremy is saying, but like, no, because the problem is still there. And I think this is highlighted by like the factory farming example, where like, let me just quickly draw. Let me just fucking get so like animals.
Oh, God.
That's it. It's just like,
I guess I'm going to take an opportunity to leave now. Now he's
Rams,
drawing,
I have
right?
one question for you before you go. I've been dying to ask you a question since you mentioned the Islam thing, because it's actually really relevant to this. So, right.
George is trying to drag me into getting cancelled. This is what he does every time you have George on a video or you go on his channel. He tries to get you in trouble. So this is that moment. Okay.
David Rams, who are your least favorite group of people in the world? No. So the question I was going to ask that related to that, the Islam thing you brought up, is why are Muslims so bloody hard to talk to on the street, Rams? Is because Islam is super, super, super hot on this welfarism idea that the way that they treat animals is so much better than everyone else's. They have this delusional belief that it can't be wrong because the animal doesn't feel pain when we do it. Our rules are very, very strict. It says this, blah, blah, blah. Mm. Is that not a very, very good example of welfarism hindering animal rights?
No, and I'll explain why. It's not some benign welfare thing that is the reason that they're so driven on that. It's because it's literally what the Prophet said to do. And to them, the Prophet is the eternal, perfect human. And their entire religion is, we need to emulate the Prophet as closely as possible. The Prophet Muhammad told them that halal slaughter in this specific way is halal, like this way of slaughtering is halal, which means it's permitted. And no amount of rational argument will push them off that, because it's your word versus the prophet of their religion, and you're just not going to win. The only way that I've seen around it, which I learned from Altab, you guys should check out Altab Hossein.
He's great.
Yeah, he's great. Is that basically he's spoken about how the whole point of halal slaughter was for multiple reasons, but part of it was to minimize the animal suffering. And that was the goal of the Prophet, was to minimize the suffering. Today, now we know that the best way to minimize the suffering is to not breed them in the first place, and then did you solve the whole problem? So then he makes the argument that actually, if you have the choice to not do it, if you have the choice to eat something else, that is the only halal option. But if you're doing this to an animal for pleasure, it's by default it's haram then. Because,
I think Altab's argument would be, if the Prophet Muhammad was alive today, he would choose to not just not do it at all. Whereas at the time, it was in the desert and there was hardly any vegetation. It's the whole historical context thing. I think, that is unfortunately it's still a hard sell.
No, it
when
is.
You speak to religious people, but I think you're onto something there. But yeah, Ram, sorry, I'll let you go now. Thank you very much for your contribution to this.
Yeah, thanks for trying to get me cancelled. Guys, I'll keep watching and keep it all. It's been interesting. Hopefully you can end on some agreement. George, try and get some agreements before this ends out, because it's just been all disagreements so far. I'm sure they've got common ground, right?
Absolutely. All
right, cool. Catch you.
Thank you, David. Bye.
Cheers,
guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go just for another 5 or 10 minutes, because we've gone for 2 hours now. And I think what the audience would actually like to hear is from reading the comments so far, Jeremy, I think a lot of people maybe have got the idea that you're making quite wild claims with the assumption about the time it takes. You've been saying, but we could get this done in however many years, blah, 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 if only we do this. Like,
Sure.
do you actually have evidence for that?
I don't need evidence for saying that if you double the number of vegan each year, you end up in a vegan world in 20 years. It's theoretical, of course. So we don't know in practice where it will lead. But even if it's not 20 years, even if it's 40, even if it's 100, we can actually create a vegan world by changing the mindset. And in fact, it's the only way to do it, because if you don't change the mindset, you will stabilize the injustice, you will normalize the injustice, and maybe you will reduce the amount of victims because people will eat less animals, but you will have victims forever because people will not put in question the right to exploit.
Yeah, but I'm going to bring up a very good French term here for you, Jeremy. Plateau. Things plateau, don't they? You can sometimes, and I think this is what Hancock mentioned happened in the UK. We had this explosion here of veganism probably about a decade ago. You had the number of vegans rose by 300% in a very short number of years. It was crazy. And now what seems to have happened, Jack, I don't know if you agree with this. It seems to have just kind of stagnated. It hasn't grown. There's something we're missing and we need to push. It's like it's got to something percent. And now the number of vegans in the UK doesn't seem to be growing at the moment. That could be one fear. If we go with your idea, Jeremy, about just, super rely on the education and blah, 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 there's something else you need. It stops somewhere.
Can I just weigh in as well? In that, like, I think that there are a lot of people who would support quite like radical abolitionist changes for animals, but who in the current world wouldn't go vegan because they feel like there's this huge problem they're being hit with. Like, okay, maybe someone makes them more aware of like what's happening to animals, and like, okay, that is a serious problem. But me going vegan, the problem's still going to be there. It's a drop in the ocean. They might think,
no problem.
And I think these same people, if they were given the opportunity to like vote to like end factory farming or end animal farming or end slaughterhouses, I think would be more open to that as a collective, because then it actually addresses the problem that they want to address,
But it doesn't address the problem of the right to exploit, Jack. And this is the root cause of animal exploitation.
I think it does, though. I think that if
How?
In the UK, so I think that in the UK now, if we pass a law saying that slaughterhouses are now illegal for the sake of the animals, factory farming is now illegal on the sake of the animals. This is happening in a context where currently we just cannot get any attention to the mainstream about this issue, even though it's like arguably the most important issue on earth in terms of like the numbers of number of beings being like tortured in farms. It's so indefensible. We can't get any attention to it. If we have like a blow into the mainstream of like, we're doing this, we're ending slaughterhouses, we're ending factory farms, I just think it is an incredibly like radical take to say that this isn't going to have any positive impact on the attitudes of the people who are living in that culture.
I don't say that it doesn't involuntarily lead people to become vegan, but it's only involuntarily. Because if you ban slaughterhouse and if you ban a factory farm, this has nothing to do with the idea that we have the right to exploit animals. So
I've got a really good
vegan, but only involuntarily.
I've got a question here from Chris Hines that I think is more going to be directed at you, Jack. I don't know how relevant this will be to you, Jack, but I think this is in the case that you think we should promote welfarism at all, rather than just, placidly kind of vote on things while promoting abolition. But Chris says, has the idea that promoting purely abolition will naturally lead to welfare reforms anyway being brought up? Industries would try to save face and we'll keep a consistent message throughout. So what he's saying is, like, Jack, should we not just completely scrap any kind of welfarism from our messaging, and then you get this kind of radical flank effect thing where it's like you go super hardcore abolition at these industries, and then we'll just get what we want with welfare reforms anyway, because as a result of that, farmers will say, fuck, they're onto us, we need to give them bigger cages, fuck, we need to stop the chick shredding, we need to stop this, we need to stop that.
So I think that Chris has a good point, and I absolutely think that there needs to be a contingent to the animal movement that is absolutely radical in their aims, in asking what exactly should be the case for animals, and pushing that Overton window. But I think that we then also need a contingent to the movement that, even though they might want the same thing, an end to animal exploitation, they're willing to work within industry, within government, to actually, when those opportunities do arise, when there is enough public attention to get something to change, like in Switzerland, where there was a vote on banning factory farming, that we have people within doing the inside game who are able to push those things through. I think we need both sides. I think we need an abolitionist radical flank, and I think we need a more moderate voice as well. And ironically, given how we're at each other's throats, we're kind of being in this conversation, I think the two actually benefit from each other. I think we're on the same team.
Absolutely not. This is a very dangerous idea, and this is why we are slowing down the vegan movement with this very idea that we need both of them. It's absolutely the opposite. When you don't challenge the idea that we have the right to exploit, what you are telling to people is that it's okay to exploit animals if it's done in a local way, and this will stabilize the injustice, and this will make animal exploitation stay forever.
I just don't agree that passing some welfare reform to make animals be tortured less necessarily means that the message is it's okay to torture animals. It's okay to exploit animals.
Absolutely, because you are an animal defender, Jack. You are a vegan. You think that animal exploitation is wrong, right? And you are telling to people who are non-vegan, oh, we can make the cage bigger, right? We can slit the throat in a way that animals feel less pain. So maybe you think that it's wrong in your head, but the message that you send is that it's okay to do it if it's not very painful. And this is very problematic.
Do you not think that we can have both? That we can say hey, for the animals who currently exist in this industry, let's make sure that none of them are being boiled alive. That's a step that we can all agree on. But also, we need to go much further than this. Animals shouldn't be put in these places at all. I think that we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, basically. In fact, I think, and I know you completely disagree with this, but I think that improving the welfare of animals is getting us closer to animal liberation.
But how? Explain me the precise mechanism by how making the cage bigger lead people to understand that the right to animal we don't have the right to exploit animals.
Yeah, so I think that the kind of cage-free reform is a good example. I think that when all the eggs are cage-free, and then people are going into the supermarket and saying, it's very easy to say when that's what's available, I buy cage-free eggs because I care about animals. I think that reinforces an identity of caring about animals. And I think that getting people to care more about animals gets us closer to being as woke as you are on animals, basically.
But no, because when you care about cage-free eggs, you don't care about animals. Because cage-free eggs, animals are still exploited.
Yeah, but you do care about...
You do care about the suffering of animals, which is not the same as the freedom.
Animals care about their suffering.
Yes, I don't deny that. But cage-free eggs is still not freedom. They are still exploited. It's exactly the same. They are still enslaved.
But but Jack is saying, why have the slavery and the suffering when you can just have the slavery? It's the better of the two options, obviously. I would rather be enslaved and not suffer than be enslaved and suffer.
You are right, but this is a false dilemma, because you have a third option, which is freedom.
So how do you how do you think about what happened in Switzerland then? That this country with way higher welfare than the rest of the world,
had
a referendum, a public vote that almost 50% of the public 50% of the public agreed with to ban almost abolishing factory farming. And if you look into countries with a really poor welfare, like China or America, there hasn't been any vote on factory farming. It doesn't even seem within the Overton window.
Yeah. And
so how do you make sense of that? That there's this abolitionist policy to abolish.
It's not abolitionist. It's where there is a confusion. If you abolish, Jack, if you abolish the factory farm, you will stabilize the exploitation of animals if it's not done in a industrial way.
I think banning factory farming would be like the biggest destabilization of animal exploitation in the history of human civilization. Here's a little. You remember I was going to make a little graph, and you guys didn't give me a chance.
Go on, let's see it, Jack.
I don't know if it's going to be able to see it.
This is the graph. Imagine, Jeremy, you know that little tree diagram you've got? Scrunch it up and throw it in the bin right now, because Jack's now.
So imagine this bar is a representation of all the animals being exploited on Earth, and this here up to this line is animals in factory farms. That's factory farming.
Yeah.
And I'm saying if there's a vote to get rid of all of this, and we're left with this small, relatively, it's still a big number, but relatively small amount of animal exploitation left, I think that getting rid of all of this makes getting rid of this much more likely. That's like 95% of the problem.
Yes, and you will always have animals who will exploited. Meanwhile, with my solution, you will have no more animal exploited in the long run, Jack. We have to think in the long run, not in the short term.
This
is the point.
It's kind of like imagine. I mean, this might be unfair, but it's also kind of funny. It's like I have this like major problem. I said funny, now I'm going to say a major problem with chronic pain, where I have pain in my foot whenever I'm standing, and it's really debilitating. And I'm speaking to a doctor, and they're like, "Look, we're going to do this intervention, and it's going to alleviate 95% of the problem you care about." And
it has nothing to do. This is not an injustice.
And I'm like, no, clearly not, because I'm still in pain. And it's like, yeah, but if we get rid of 95% of the problem that you care about, Jeremy, then getting rid of the rest of the 5% becomes more likely.
Jack, what Jeremy is saying is that the other option is the doctor says, now you will have more intense pain, but it will only be for 1 week, and then it's going to be eliminated. I think that's his argument. So he's saying that with this doctor that you're going to, who says that, they're going to give you this thing that reduces 95% of the pain, but it gives you it for the rest of your life. Jeremy is perhaps quite confidently saying, maybe too confidently, that Jeremy is going to say, no, I'm going to give you this drug that's going to keep you in pain, but it's only going to be for 1 year.
Or 20 years.
Or 20 years or whatever, and then it's gone.
Whereas I'm saying, I think it's very intuitive to say that, like, if you get rid of 95% of animal exploitation, society has the momentum, and we're more likely to get rid of the last 5%. And if
this is a great story. The momentum, guys. This is a great story. This is what we told to when we look at transatlantic slavery. People say this has led to a momentum, but there is no momentum. This is not what happened. There is no momentum. If you focus on the suffering of animals, I understand where you're coming from, Jack. I have seen your video on the intervention on nature, and we can discuss that. It's very interesting. But the problem of exploitation, of slavery, is not about suffering. And anytime you make the point that if we exploit animals in a less painful way, it's good, we are missing the point that justice is not about the pain that the victim feels. Justice is about treating someone as a means to an end. And as long as you don't help people to understand that and why they should respect animals, we will always have exploitation, but in another way.
Yeah, I think that, like, even if we were just focused on like exploitation, I'm still saying that getting rid of factory farming is getting rid of like 95% of exploitation. And I think there's just like a big difference between us, where, like, you know, I think that you're overly confident on like,
but What do you think about creating a vegan world in 20 years?
If I was convinced that your theory of change, that if I just focused on getting individuals to change, and the animal movement focused on just getting individuals to go vegan, would create a vegan world in 20 years, then I would drop everything I'm doing and just do that.
Jack, are you not convinced that you can create one person vegan in 1 year?
Yes.
So if you can, I can too. George, you can. And I think, George, you can make 10. I can make 100, and you can make maybe 1,000. And no,
you gave me the least. That's thanks, Jeremy.
Allez, 100 also. But you can do one vegan in 1 year, right? You are clever, Jack. You are well spoken. You are articulated. You can definitely.
I like where you're going with this.
He's schmoozing you, Jack. Watch out.
You know what? I think I'm starting to change my mind.
you can definitely make a great impact on the world. Definitely.
Well, why don't we all make a closing statement, and then we'll sign off. So, I'll start with mine. This would be my final thoughts from the debate. And bear in mind, I've not been a moderator in this debate. I've been a participant in it. So this is my actual opinion. I'm not going to play neutral or anything. I'm not convinced that, with Jeremy's point, that it would necessarily prolong everything. However, I do believe that there is data with some things that would show people that does increase the amount of people that buy something. For example, the egg study I mentioned earlier, that is concerning. That said, I do think there are some things that it would just be silly not to vote for. One of those things would be a ban on factory farming. It's simply not so, because carnists can talk all they want about buying local and sustainable and grass-fed and high welfare and blah, blah, blah. It's simply not physically possible to do. So if we were to eliminate factory farming, the industry is very, very screwed because it's just not doable. You can't have, think of the size of a grass-fed farm to feed the whole of the UK. You would need literally the farm to be about the size of Australia to feed 55 million Brits on grass-fed cows. So it's simply not doable. So there are just some things that I absolutely do think it would make sense not to vote for. Jeremy, please make your closing statement.
Welfare reform is not moral. It's unfair. If we were the victim, we will never accept to be sacrificed in order to achieve a good cause. So it's not moral. We don't have the right to do that first. And with women, we will never give drugs to men for that. When they rape them, they feel less suffering. So we have to stop that. We have to stop betraying animals first. And second, it doesn't work. It leads to reinforce the slavery because people now feel more comfortable about their choice. And they said, oh, don't talk to me about veganism. I make my part. I buy local farm. So I am a good person. So don't talk to me about that. It reinforces animal exploitation. It pushes abolition away forever. Vegan education can create a world in 20 years. It's easy. We can do that if we trust people, if we are respectful with people, and if we are uncompromising in our message.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jack?
Yeah, I suppose this kind of conversation is partly coming down to just like, how do we most effectively help animals? How do we most effectively achieve animal liberation? And truth is, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think that it won't come down to any one strategy, any one theory of change. I don't think it would just be welfare reform leading to animal liberation. That definitely wouldn't happen. I also don't think that it's getting individuals to go vegan would lead to a vegan world. Not in 20 years, not ever, actually. I think that we need a diverse ecosystem full of lots of different activists pursuing different strategies, including welfare, including vegan outreach. I think ultimately we're kind of early in the movement to liberate animals, and it should require a lot of experimentation, and we should acknowledge a lot of uncertainty that we don't have all the answers right now, and we need more research. And yeah, so that's my case, that we should have a diverse range of strategies to help animals in the current world.
Cool. Yeah. And Rams came in earlier and he wanted to say for everyone to just get to agree on something before we end. I think the one thing that we all agree on is we all want the animal holocaust to be over. I think we just, everyone in the movement has different ways of getting there. We want to find whatever the most effective thing is to end it. Would you guys both agree on that?
Sure.
Absolutely. I think we all agree on like the moral patienthood of animals. They matter, and what's happening is an emergency. Yeah. So yeah, I'm grateful that Jeremy exists, and he's thinking about how to help animals and spending part of his life doing that.
That's a very nice message to end with, Jack. Right.
I am also grateful for you, Jack, and thank you for the conversation. Thank you for your respect, for your listening, and yeah. So thanks for everything, and I hope that this conversation can help people to make their opinion, and maybe something positive can go out from that.
Great. Yep. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and yeah, it's a bye from us all here.
Bye.
Bye.